The following video is a video that I personally have a lot to talk about. And for this channel, yeah, that's kind of relevant what you're about to see. So, happy Father's Day, people. I don't really have that much to say other than I don't really have that many things to say about Father's Day in of itself, though. Regardless of what you may think of it, though, I personally think it's a safe bet that Father's Day just really depresses me in a lot of ways, though. Especially because I myself don't have my dad anymore. I was originally going to do a video about how I felt about my dad, but there are two things wrong with that. The first is that while I do have a lot to say about what goes into my dad, I personally think it's a safe bet. Even if I did, what's the point? It wouldn't do much anyways. And second, even if this was the case for what some people may say, though, I personally don't have that much to say about my dad other than I really do miss him. And even to this day, it still chokes me up that he's not here to celebrate with me. Rest in peace, my man. Even though it's going to be almost a decade long that you aren't here anymore. But you can bet that for Father's Day today, I have a somewhat of a special treat for you. Yeah, needless to say, this treat is gonna be one that's both sweet and sour. If you don't know what I mean, well, just you wait, because we're going into my Jose list. Again. And I mean that in the most nicest way possible. Yeah. In case you guys don't know, I did a list of my favorite Jose anime way back in March of 2025 of this year. My god, the more I think of these months, the more I start asking myself, where the hell did this year go by, though? Oh well, it's better than nothing. Anyways, the Jose list itself had two anime that I wanted to take a look at, one of which being Magical Girl Ore, which I already discussed before now. And honestly, you can go check that out after this video if you want to, though. But the other anime I want to talk about was Usagi Drop. And I'm conflicted when it comes to something like this. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I've never really talked about too many controversial things other than, say, the worst shows out there, like Adult Party Cartoon and Velma. But if you think those there are the worst of the worst, though, then honestly, you have no idea how much that Usagi Drop wanted me to bite my tongue and say, yeah, this is going to be painful for me, though. The anime has more problems than what could have been, though. But what honestly, though, the anime itself is actually more tame than whatever could have been, though. And when I say that, I really mean it. Now, if you really want to see something controversial, imagine reading the manga. Yeah, as a nosy flamingo, I myself wanted to take a look at this last year, but I'll get into the reasons why I couldn't do it last year as we move on. So, without further ado, let's talk about Usagi Drop, both the anime and the manga, and see how much people will want to fuss about it, though. So, let's get. I guess it's only fitting if I just talk about the anime itself first before we get into the manga. Trust me, it's best to try something sweet before we get into sour sometimes. Anyways, the series itself focuses around our main protagonist, Daikachi Kawachi, a 30-year-old bachelor who seems to have woken up from some sort of dream that he doesn't know what it is, though, until his mother starts calling him that his grandfather, Soichi, has passed away a night ago at the age of 79. Daikachi goes and gets ready, though, but not until he starts asking himself, who is that little girl and that older man, though? He doesn't think it was him, though, but he thought it was his grandfather and his mother when she was a little girl, though. That is until he seems to be wandering around his life so much more like, say, what would if this little girl was his mother, though, until going back home when he starts seeing the said little girl, except this time it's not anyone that he's familiar with, though. It's not Rana, unfortunately, but rather it's Rinkawa. Rinkawa is not all of what she seems to be, because honestly, though, believe it or not, she's actually the illegitimate daughter of Soichi's grandfather, though. And while the funeral keeps going on, no, this little girl just doesn't seem to want to open up at times, though. Daikachi tries opening her up, though, but it's not as easy, though, considering that she's still unused to a lot of people around her, and what's more, she's not so sure of what's going on, though. Even when everyone tries to give her the cold shoulder but after trying so hard to do whatever he can to open her up, though. It's here where we see that someone in the family just thinks it's best for her to go ahead and just put her into a care facility. Which, again, I have to ask, like I said in my video, how does a 6-year-old know what a care facility is? And I'm pretty sure that they're going to be alright, though. Seriously, what the fuck? I understand that you don't want to do anything with the kid, but Jesus Christ, dude. But then again, after her being pissed off about this, rightfully so, Daikachi had enough with this shit and decides to take Rin home, only to realize that he has yet to learn the process of taking care of being a parent and being taking care of a kid, even if it means going through a lot with whatever happens, though. So with that right off the bat, Daikachi decides to take Rin in, since she has nowhere else to go, and since the mother's nowhere to be found, which I'll get to in a bit, though. It's here where we see that how much Daikachi and Rin start growing close to each other as the series can. So as you can tell from that description alone, though, I can at least assure you that while the show itself is only 11 episodes and 4 shorts long, it does a surprisingly amount of good things into this year anime that you wouldn't expect it, though. I will say for an anime as short as this, though, it does surprisingly a lot of good pacing when it comes right down to it. You see Daikachi slowly growing to learn and start realizing that being a parent or a mortal guardian is not always as cracked up to be, though. But he's still able to learn regardless of what happens, though. And even as someone who takes care of the kids part-time, while I can't really relate into this situation, even I'll admit that it's really worth pointing out that it's not always easy taking care of a kid, regardless if you're taking care of them part-time or if you're just getting new to it to become the parenting of having care of a kid. But speaking of kid characters, I have to fully admit something right off my chest, though, when it comes right down to kid characters. So let's get this out of the way. Being real with you here, though, I know for a fact some people are going to say that kid characters are easy to write. Which, in all seriousness, though, I don't think it's as easy as people make it out to be, though, because let's get this out of the way. What comes to your head when it comes to kid characters? You usually think that they're out there to go on an adventure or going out to, say, do some action, which you see in a lot of anime. But as I alluded to, this is a josei anime. Josei is not really known to have, well, shows that are mostly always action and stuff like that. Though, admittedly, I don't really think I've seen an action series with the josei anime that I've come across, unless you count Magical Girl Ore, which I personally find that more of a parody rather than an action series. Even though there was a little action when it comes to the demons in mind, though. But as kid characters, especially something like, say, Usagi Drop, it doesn't really shy away of how kid characters would act, though. And let's be real here for a second. As someone who's been around kids since around forever, I can at least assure you that not every kid is going to be out there thinking that they're just there to be naive and everything else, though. Kids are smarter than they are, though, and Usagi Drop in real life as well have kids act like kids that they usually are, though. They can be naive about the world around them, they can ask questions, they are still experimenting with what's around the world, and as well as have something else that goes in mind, though. I will assure you that when it comes to kid characters, while I admit that there's always a very few slice of life shows when it comes to your kid characters, a lot of people assume that they're just there and there's nothing more than just that, though. And honestly, I find that pretty hurtful, just to say that kid characters will never learn because they're just there to be kid characters and nothing more. I disagree with that myself entirely, and focus what I'm about to say here, since I already know what some people are gonna. Even if I've been around a lot of kids since I was a kid, though, especially ones that I started working with, I actually will admit that not every kid acts the same way, or in this case, they don't always behave the way they do, though. And I know this because every time you see kids, they usually either play around or they're just gonna ask parents a bunch of questions of the world around them, though. And that's really something to grow over, though. Usagi Drop does something like that, too. Like, you're not supposed to find these kids perfect, and while they are smarter than they are, though, they're not going to know everything around them, though. Kids these days are learning more as time goes on, and for someone who has really remarked towards that, though, I can at least say that's really something that you should at least be aware of, though. I mean, it's not every day you see kids being smarter than they are, though. I would tell you a few examples of kids that I know, but I'm not going to say anything since I want them to remain anonymous for this video. But I'm gonna say this right here and now though. Kids are still learning. They're still growing. And even if you do have kids of your own, it's really tough to say what they're gonna be like when they grow up. And while I admit that is true, the only way you can experience how they're going to grow up is how you raise them. And sometimes it can work one way or the other. Sometimes kids who have neglectful parents will just think they'll just do whatever and not to do anything to have them learn, while other kids I can at least say with confidence there are good parents out there who will raise their kid to be really good, but they sometimes don't have anything like that though. I'm not saying that you can't do anything to have your kid learn anything, but even as someone who has been taking care of kids only part-time, I can't really answer what's it like to do it full-time, especially when it comes to having a job though. And this is what I mean when I say that taking care of kids is not always easy, whether it's due to how they get lack of disciplinary, or maybe it's because they just have yet growing and learning though. I mean, I take care of kids in my family, so I know for certainty that taking care of kids is not always easy. Sure, a lot of them could make them into, say, they're none the wiser, but I say that if you don't know how to take care of your kids, there's nothing much I can say about it. But let's get back to Usagi drop in of itself. If I have to be honest, though, taking care of a kid, while it's not as always easy as one may crack it up to be, though, it's also pretty clear that the show itself is not ashamed to admit that kids can still be kids, even if they are smarter than they are, though. Even Rin and Daikachi's bonding is one of the cutest things I've seen in anime do, though. And I say anime because, honestly, I don't think I've seen a lot of anime this far where they had so already though. I did show this to a family member, and let me tell you, I did say this in my list and I'll say it again. I showed this to my Nana, and like I alluded to, my Nana started watching this with me only months later though. And there's a reason why that is though. See, in case you guys don't know, I didn't watch this series last year exactly on Father's Day. No, I watched it a month later, which honestly, I don't like to do things that are about too late, if anything, considering that I want to do it right away, even if it does take away some of my mental health and everything like that. Daikachi and Rin's bonding is quite nice for this anime, though. And despite how short it is, it does a lot of things going for Rin and Daikachi. They're bonding, to show how much they grow, to ask questions if either of them have anything to experience on that, though. I mean, slice of life may not be for everyone, but here's what I have to say in its own favor, though. A lot of people think that slice of life is, well, just boring, and it's just there to be realism. When I say that slice of life, a lot of people and then people say it's boring. Well, obviously they either overlook the genre or they just never noticed the things that they did watch as slice of life, though. I can't really name a lot off the top of my head, but the thing is, slice of life is an easy way to soothe things out, though. I'm not saying you can't really have any action shows or movies or anything like that on the lines, though, but it's nice to take a little break from the action sometimes. Like, give yourself a calm, soothing, mellow tone to yourself, though, and Usagi Drop does that pretty well. Yeah, there are some others, like, say, Your Lies in April and Kiki's The Delivery Service, but the latter has more fantasy to it. I will admit, it does depend on what you're looking for, though. Slice of life can also be realism in itself, meaning that you don't have to think about the magical elements and stuff like that, considering that there are some times where it can show what you can do with it, though. But Usagi Drop does that effectively, though. There are some things I can go over what I like about it, though, but if I have to pick my favorites, though, I think it has to do with how they handle the episodes themselves. Like, say, the episode called Stomach Flu, where Rin gets the stomach flu and Daikachi has to take care of her, though. I will say, for an episode like this, I started watching it for myself, and I honestly relate to Daikachi as well when it comes to having kids who are sick. Because I actually did take care of kids who were sick, but honestly, when it comes to stomach flu, I get severely panicked after that, though, because I really don't know how else to put it, other than you see them getting all flushed and getting watery eyes, just like Rin is in the picture here, though, anyways. And I say that because, let's be honest, no adult out there wants to see their child get sick, or someone that they're taking care of getting sick. I mean, sure, Rin is not really technically Daikachi's biological child, but I'll get to that later though. Or hell, how about episodes where we do meet one kid character I really say that I actually didn't mind was Koki. And Koki is, well, he's basically what a lot of people think of little boy characters. He can be rambunctious, he can be one of those kids who doesn't want to listen to their parents or anyone else around him, though. But by the end of the day, he still has a good heart because he helped Rin out when she was getting teased after saying that she's a weird kid, all because she doesn't want to talk about who her father was in a lot of ways, though. And honestly, for a series like this, how could you blame something like that to a child, though, who has no idea how to talk about their history, though? I mean, it's really bad enough when you realize that a lot of people are going to question and say, oh, who was your father, or who was your mother, and stuff like that. But Koki is a different kind of story. I mean, yeah, where Daikachi took Rin in because she had nowhere else to go, though. Oh, Koki is actually the son of Yukari, and I do apologize in advance that I'm saying it, though, because, again, I'm not good at pronouncing Japanese names, so you can bite my tongue if you want to. One thing I will say about Koki is that he's one of those kids who has a parents who are divorced, and even as someone who had divorced parents, I can definitely say while I can't really relate to him about him being, well, a kid in this position, though. I mean, my parents separated when I was around, say, 10 years old, but even so, though, Koki's parents are divorced, and we don't really see them father in this here anime. Instead, we see Yukari, as I alluded to. Now, when it comes to Yukari, I have to say, though, for a mother character, she really does take care of her son pretty well, though. Even if, yeah, her son doesn't want to listen at times, though, I will say that may come off as a pet peeve, but I also have to argue that it's kind of understandable considering that, let's be honest, kids don't know how to act at times, though, from time to time when it comes to divorced parents, and while they have only their one parent to take care of them, though, it's also pretty hard to do so. But honestly, Yukari is a pretty interesting character, and honestly, it's too bad we never get to know her name, and honestly, the only way I found out about her name was through resources of themselves, though. Unfortunately, and I do mean unfortunately, there were only 2 adult characters that I sadly did not care for. I don't want to go over too many characters, so I'm just gonna talk about 2 more before we wrap the anime up, though. So let's start off with Kazumi, because honestly, I can't really put my finger on how much I can't stand this woman. And on some level, I can kind of understand where she's coming from. She's a person who doesn't want any kids, even though her fiance, yes, she has a fiance, what a shock, who actually doesn't mind having kids, but Kazumi does. Now, I will say this for the record, not every adult has to have kids. I mean, hell, I don't want kids, and I still adore them in spite of all that, even if it is part-time, though. But you know how some of those adults don't want kids to the point where they'll just aggress about it, though, to the point of something else, though? Yeah, that's something like Kazumi in a nutshell. And I say this with no exaggeration, no. She's really one of those adults who just goes so far out of her way just to act like whenever Rin comes over, she has to act like, oh, it's all terrible. Like, oh, what is she doing with mom and dad or some shit like that. Like, lady, you work almost a lot of the time, though. I don't see a problem with Rin coming over. It's almost like my younger sister, and I hate to compare her to her, but yeah, I get where she's coming from, and honestly, Kazumi can fill the gaps into people, what's it like, and let's be honest, not every adult deserves kids at the end of the day. Some people just want to be off freely, so she wants to go out drinking, or go to clubs, or go somewhere else or something. That I can understand, though, but did you really have to go so far as to act like a cold shoulder towards Rin when she's just visiting your family? Seriously, it's not that bad when you get down to it, though. I'm sorry, I really can't understand why that is, though. But honestly, that's fucking bananas to compare it to the big middle finger of this other character, Masako. And I don't say that as in, oh, she's only there because she just doesn't want anything to do with Rin instead, though, because why not? No. I won't miss words with you, though. I said this in my list, so if you want to check that out, you can, but honestly, I think it's best to elaborate a little better in this video, considering that there's a lot more to it than just that, though. And honestly, with Masako, Go, I could not stand this woman for the life of me. And you know, say what you want about Kazumi. I can understand where she's coming from, and at least she doesn't have a kid to worry about. But Misako, she's an entire different story. In case you guys haven't seen my other video, I said that she's one of those characters who's a workaholic parent and she wants nothing to do with Rin, and she doesn't claim to be Rin's mother. What's more, she cares more about her work than anything. Which, again, I don't really have to say that this is an affection towards every adult out there. Let's be honest. Taking care of a kid and doing that with a job is not easy. I can understand that. Hell, my mom still works and she still takes care of us from time to time, though. But what I'm saying here is that Misako is the equivalent of what happens when you just left your child right there, abandon them, and not even show signs and say, hey, I can't do this anymore, so I'm gonna have to drop you out, because why not, though? This is one aspect I can never stand, though. A lot of people always say that every adult out there is gonna treat their kids how they are, but personally, I like to think that you can only have a kid when you're ready. And if you're not ready, well, there's a reason why this woman I can never stand, no. At least with Kazumi, I can at least tolerate a little more, because at least she doesn't overstay her welcome. But with Misako, while she's not in every episode, I will say the episode she is in just makes herself more clueless. Like, she doesn't know what's going on, and she's not sure what to think of Rin. Even when Daikachi gives Rin some pictures of what's going on in daycare and stuff. Like, Daikachi, I know it's probably just me, but I wouldn't give those pictures to Misako even if my life depended on it. And her boyfriend, even though he doesn't have a name, he probably has better patience than I do, because I would have dumped this woman right off the bat. Yeah, I'm not gonna speak too much of it, because I already said what I had to say in the list and say on here. So with all that said, I think it's safe to say we can go on to the manga. So be warned for where. So, all of what I've said to you was actually supposed to be the first half of the manga, which is what they adapted into the anime. And a lot of people actually thought that was pretty good and satisfying conclusion, right? Well, let's be honest though. The first half of the manga, as well as the anime that they only adapted, actually did pretty well for itself. So you would think that after the manga has ended its own original run, you would think that would be the end of the story, right? Well, no. So, strap yourselves into this bumpy roller coaster, because honestly, we're in for some deep sea shit. So, you're probably wondering what I mean by that it's from some deep sea shit. Well, honestly, you either have never heard the controversy, or you're just lucky enough to not know about the controversy. Because, guess what? The manga itself only had half of it adapted into the anime. Yeah, most of what I told you, especially with this anime, it only had the first half of it though. And while I admit that's actually not that bad at hindsight, some people who probably were asking for a second season were probably thinking they should have had one. I was one of them anyways though, until I started realizing why they didn't though. Yeah, I didn't say this a lot though, but yeah, the second half, or in this case, the reason why there's never gonna be a second season has to do with the backlash of the second half of the manga. So, by that perspective, you would think that they would focus on Daikachi, of how is it like when he's taking care of Rin when she gets older. This wouldn't be much of a bad problem if it wasn't for the fact of what they did to it though. See, in case you guys don't know, the manga itself was basically a 10-year time skip, which I honestly find kind of unnecessary. At least personally, I find. And I'm saying this as in when it comes to the anime itself, I'm glad they never got a second season, because guess what? The manga itself decided to turn it around a bit. As I alluded to, they had a 10-year time skip, which I'm not sure what to feel about this. Yeah, something like, say, Slice of Life could have time skips, and honestly, I don't think this will be ever the first time, nor will be the last, because the last time I saw a time skip, even though it was on the last episode, would be on Kids on the Slope, another Josei anime I covered on that list. But the second half of the manga is mostly about, instead of focusing on Daikachi's point of view, we instead get Rin's point of view as she grows up to be a 10 years older, her teenager, instead of being the 6 to 7 year old girl that we knew and loved, though. And don't get me wrong, I'm not for having time skips here and there, but this just seems kind of unnecessary, even for this manga standards, though. Without giving too much into detail, though, I guess I can start off by saying the manga sounded like it had a good idea. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, how many of you guys want to know what's it like in Ren's perspective, since we already know the perspective of having an adult around, though? Well, not really the good execution you hoped it would have, though. Yeah, as much as I hate to admit it, though, the second half of this is really distasteful. In fact, I go so far as saying you guys are probably going to be throwing up after this video, which I take full responsibility for. For example, I thought at first they were going to go so far as to talk about, say, Rin and Haruki actually getting together, though, once they hit high school together. Which, honestly, I thought at first they would at least do, because, let's be honest, it could be kind of like a Pebble with and Bam Bam thing going on. Like, have the two get together or something, and it didn't really do that. I'm not going to show too many pictures of the manga copies, but needless to say, there were some things I found pretty forced and really unlikable as this execution goes on. For example, Rin, as she goes to high school, she has no one to be attracted to other the fact that she's high school where there are a lot of cute boys, you would think, but nope, apparently she doesn't find anything attracted. Not even going with Koki, if anything to judge by, though, because Koki actually has somebody, his own girlfriend, and I don't know if it's just me, but I find this one of two ways. The reason I say that is because on some level I can understand I want to put a realism into it, saying that even if you are a close friend to someone, you're going to have someone else, even if you are friends with them at the past. But on the other hand, this just seems like a dark turn for me, though. And it just doesn't get any prettier as time goes on, though. Like, the fact that Rin and Koki, you would think they would get together, but apparently not. Somehow Koki has another girlfriend, and somehow even his girlfriend just won't leave Rin alone. Like, she keeps cyberbullying him, she keeps texting messages to him to the point where Rin had to change her number, and she won't even leave her alone. And somehow, even after changing her number, somehow even Koki's girlfriend somehow knows that she changed her number in spite of all that, though. Which, I'm not sure how she knew this, though. Now, don't get me wrong, I have seen this before in real life, though, but even I'll admit that's still pretty much bullshit. Like, how do you know the person's number changed when you don't even know their number by heart like that? Did you make Koki spill the beans or something? Because, honestly, I wouldn't know it either. Well, though I can at least show you one page of the manga about Misako. So, you remember when I said that Misako said that she wasn't ready to be a mother and she wasn't capable enough to take care of Rin? Yeah, apparently that changes in the manga, because for some reason the manga establishes that when Misako has a child, she decides to keep that child and not to keep Rin, as you see here, though. And from what I gather, though, it's really come to the point where Misako is able to keep this kid over Rin, though. Okay, I have questions about this, so strap yourselves in when I ask these questions. First, if you really think you didn't have the goal to take care of Rin, then why the fuck do you think it's best for you to take care of the second kid that you started making after getting knocked up again? Second, the boyfriend you have, though, while I admit that at least he's younger than Soichi, so at least I can give him a pass, but I know I'm gonna break someone's heart if I say this, though, but he's just too good for this woman. Like, I don't know if it's just me because I have a lack of patience, and trust me, I do have a lack of patience from time to time, but the patience that I seem to lack here is really this guy in himself, though. And honestly, I have feelings to that someone's gonna come at me and say that nice guys are really nice guys and there's nothing wrong with that. Beware of saying this, though. I don't have a problem with people in general who are nice, at least to me or anyone else around them, but there's something I need to strap in here, so let's get this out of the way. Misako's boyfriend doesn't have a name, so your guess is as good as mine if you can tell me what his name is in the comments, if you can find out. But one thing I will say about this guy is that it's just unbelievable he can put up with this woman's behavior. Even when she pushes him away, or one time when and they were both in the apartment together when she was still working on her manga and taking a break, though, he asked if she could give him some of her yogurt, but it's like, nope. Like, seriously, you didn't want to share with him? No. I don't know if it's just me coming off as mean, because honestly, I can be mean at times, but I could never, ever stand characters or people who can put up with shitty behavior like this. It just makes them feel like a doormat at times. And I hate saying that, considering I know that nice guys are better than, say, people who will do something to take advantage of you, but you're really making your nice personality, like the nicest personality you can have, as their own advantage to take advantage of. Anyways, though, granted, Misako doesn't do anything to take advantage of him, but I'm just saying, though, that's just one way to push yourself into saying, hey, why don't I just go ahead and do this or do that anyways, though. And I'd be hit or miss if I didn't mention this, though, but I really couldn't give less of a rat's ass what happened to Misako. Even if she does have a kid in the manga, which, again, I have to ask, why is it okay to take care of that child rather than Rin? And before you say she just wasn't ready at the time, that still leaves a lot of bullshit reasons of why you just left Rin out in the dust like that. I mean, sure, having a kid is not for everybody. I can understand. But, my god. This woman makes Lou Smith from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air look like a better parent by comparison. And he was only in one episode instead of a few of them we got in there, though, in the anime, though. But by far, I think the worst of it has to do with the controversy surrounding it. So bear with me for just a second before I get into whatever detail I can think of. One thing I will say is that I get what Usagi Drop was going for. The second half was supposed to show a more realistic way, I guess you could put it, in a darker stage of what happens, though. But personally, I really think it's a safe bet when it comes to something like this. I think it's safe to say they took a really dark turn. And before you get mad at me, I get what they're trying to say. They're trying to say that not everything is going to be all light and cozy and stuff like that. But keep this in mind. This was a heartwarming series, a lighthearted series. Lighthearted shows, if anything, while they do have intense moments, they never went to stoop this intense, because a lot of what happens in the manga, for some asinine reason, decides to go ahead and take a turn for the worst. And I don't mean this as in, say, it's an exaggeration. I mean this is a literal thing that happened. So, what you're gonna hear from me is probably more bitching than I thought it would be doing anyways. So, strap yourselves in. What I'm about to tell you guys is going to disgust you or just make you wonder, what the fuck? So, let's get this out of the way. When it comes to Usagi Drop's ending, one parent scene in the manga, there was this one scene where Rin asks about Daikachi how he feels about her. You know, true feelings though. Although it's pretty creepy when you realize that a teenager just trying to ask a grown-ass man, just going ahead and asking the person who adopted you, as someone say, what, do they have feelings for you or something? It just doesn't sound normal to me. And things just get turned upside down, if you know what I mean. Of course you know what I mean. Don't be so much of a dumbass if you don't. Because, as it turns out, after Rin asks Daikachi something that we're not supposed to have us know, somehow Rin asks Daikachi to, well, marry her, and Daikachi questions it. Okay, where do I even start with this? I don't even know if I even should say that, because get this out of the way. Why would you question this? I get that this is a 10-year time skip and Daikachi is in his 40s as of now, because if you remember the anime, he was in his 30s. But this shouldn't be something you should question. This should be something you should already know in advance what the answer is, though. Like, do you have to have one brain cell to tell you that you don't have to question if anyone has to say, oh, do you have feelings like that, apparently? And apparently no one seems to understand that, because guess what? In the manga, guess what happens? Everyone just says there's nothing wrong with that. Like, are you shitting me? Are you really shitting me at this point? This shouldn't be happening, though. And even after questioning about it, so many people just say they should just tell Daikachi to just go along with it. Okay, I have one question that keeps popping in my mind whenever I read this part of the manga for myself when watching a lot of viewers online. And what's more, I had to go so far as to scroll it for myself. But I have to ask, does it really take that much of a brain to tell you that you shouldn't have feelings for someone who is not just younger than you, but one who you adopted? Now, I know that they're not blood related, but this is just going way too far of proportion for me to even stomach, though. And it gets worse. So much worse. Ugh. Because you see here, at the end of the manga, it turns out that Daikachi agrees to being with Rin and agree to having a child together only after Rin graduates high school. It's just, I have no words. Just play the goddamn clip.
Dude, you're drinking cum powder? Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Ugh. In the background, I don't know if you heard it, but yeah, this is just gross. And you know what? I brought this upon myself. I really did. Like, I'm not even sure what to say about this. And you know, I have a feeling there are no words big enough to describe what I've witnessed. And you know, I think that's kind of the problem I have with myself as a person from time to time. Throughout my times when watching stuff, though, I tend to be nosy at times. Hell, you're talking to a nosy flamingo. Of course you would hear stuff like this, though. The problem I have here is not just because the manga ended the way it did, though, but also it has to do with what the writer was thinking. Like, I'm not gonna say for you guys to go ahead and just talk to the writer, see what she was coming up with. I mean, let's be honest, that's not something I want you to do. I don't want you harassing or trying to get in contact with her and just saying any death threats or anything, because that's not how it works. One thing I will say, however, is that this ending was an abomination. In fact, I think abomination is just being so far generous for what it is, though. And I can safely say, now I know why people don't like the manga. At least the second half of it, though. Like, how did this heartwarming series turn into such an abomination in the manga is something I would never understand. Like, the anime itself was pretty heartwarming. It was also very beautifully touched, and what's more, it felt a lot more with itself anyways, though. And you know, it's pretty sad when you realize that some people are gonna say, oh, it's meant to be cute where a teenager is hitting on an adult who just got adopted by her, even if they aren't blood related. To that I say, either you guys are really that disgusting, or you just really don't know what you're really trying to see for yourselves, though. This manga, the ending to the manga was disgusting. It destroyed every ounce of my sanity that I thought it would have, though. And I can safely say, now I know why so many people don't want to talk about the manga. People say they don't want to talk about Bruno. Well, there's the manga for you in a nutshell right there. And I hate saying that because Usagi Drop left a lot to be desired, though. I showed this to my Nana, and I actually did tell her why there wasn't any more content to go with the anime, but honestly, she still thinks that the anime ended perfectly as far as she's concerned. And you know what? I couldn't agree more, though. But the manga, however, is one stage I would never, ever take foot into this, though. Like I said, I was introduced to this anime when I was looking for something to watch. Last year in July, I wanted to see the series for myself, and let me tell you, I only watched this when I was searching through more josei anime during the time, even if it was well 4 or 5 months later to do so. I didn't want to cover stuff like this all the time, though, because let's be honest, controversial stuff is really hard to talk about if you've been on the internet for a while, though. And you know what? This is not a controversial opinion. This is an advice to you. If you ever do want to see Usagi Drop for yourself, please watch the anime. It's really worth your time. The manga you could just throw into the junkyard and just never lose track of it. Or if you want to look up for the manga yourself, you can watch find out where to find the first half, but the second half, yeah, you can just outright skip for that. And with that, I think it's safe to say that's all I have to say about this Father's Day video. This wasn't the kind of video I was hoping to make. Like I said, I wanted to talk more about my dad and everything, but I decided against it because, well, there wasn't much I can talk about. Unless I talk about the 10-year here, and I hate to say anniversary because that's not really an anniversary to celebrate. 10 years that he's been gone, but that won't be until, say, maybe November or so. And sadly, I think this may be the last video I'll be doing for a while right now, though. If you've seen my poll, then you already know. So yeah, as you can see here, the poll that I'm showing you right now is the poll that I hope you guys are able to vote before or anything though. But if I ever do tell you guys how things are going behind the scenes, I'll let you guys know. But the poll itself is basically about what you guys want me to do. Keep it a surprise for the next video I'll be doing or something else. So it looks like a lot of you guys really wanted me to keep it a surprise. And you know what? I think I'm just gonna do that. Keep it a surprise until further notice, though. I'm not gonna say what it is, considering that I do tell some people behind the scenes of what the what the hints are, though. But if I ever do show a poll again or something like that, I hope it's really one that I hope I don't spoil anything. But if I ever do something like that, I really can't say how much it really hurts me to see something like this, though. And honestly, I wouldn't have it either way, though. Yeah, I do apologize in advance if there's not much I can say about these here videos, considering that the next video won't be up until late July. I actually have a way of doing it before late July, since, well, like I said, July is really the busiest month for me when it comes to summertime, even though summer's like the worst time for me to do videos. I mean, I'm not saying I don't like hanging out with my family, aside from you guys, but honestly, I have to do something with my everyday life, especially when it comes to my mental health and everything. So beware of that. But with that said, I thank you all so much for watching, and thank you for sticking with me for this long. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a nice, safe summer, and hopefully I'll be back in July. And by then, I hope to surprise you what I'm going to have, though. But until then, I love you all so much, and thanks for that. So without further ado, I'll see you all next time. And as always, stay flamingo-tastic.